Hello and welcome to the Tournament Poker Project. From Essex, my name's Jon.
And I'm Tain.
And we are two recreational poker players, budding professionals. This is our journey to become poker greats, to be good enough at poker to go and compete in the World Series of Poker, and to feel confident and comfortable playing against some heavy hitters, right, Tain?
Yeah, sounds good. For long periods of time where you're playing hundreds, thousands of hands and you're not going to get found out, which is my greatest fear.
Found out what? That you're...
Just so as I continue to try to improve, one of the things that keeps coming back to me is I'm getting better and better at beating first-time opponents or people or opponents that just can't pick up on things in the right way. So they might notice that I'm really aggressive, but then that just means they don't bluff me, which is even worse because that means I know how to exploit that. But I've still got 1,001 leaks that someone who's playing against me, who knows exactly what to look for, can see what I'm doing and how I'm doing it.
See. So you mean you want to be GTO, baby? You want to be unexploitable, right?
Yes.
Yeah, me too. I want to be a GTO robot, but one that exploits. You know, the one that just knows it so well and can exploit and make some extra chips that way too.
How extra GTO do you feel you're getting? Are you GTOing?
Well, I'm reading at the moment. I'm reading how do you pronounce his name? Okani. The Beyond GTO. So it's all about exploitative play. Obviously, it uses GTO as the baseline. And yeah, I've started reading it. I'm not getting on with it at the moment, so I've put it back down again. I think it's just my frame of mind. But I think it's the way as well. He goes through the hands, but he just doesn't, in written form. So he shows the range, but it's written. So like, ace, jack, offsuit plus, and pocket fives plus. And so you just got strings of text. And usually I'm good at memorizing stuff like that, but he keeps making a point of, no, you don't need to memorize it. This is just for, you just need to understand it and then get the principle of it. But to me, if I want to just get the principle of a range, I want to just see it, and then I can kind of go, oh yeah, I get what that range means. I get what that's doing. Whereas when it's in written form, it doesn't really go in very well. So it's kind of been a bit laborious to get to understand what he's talking about. I'm kind of spending a lot of time trying to understand these this text that explains the range. But anyway, I'll get over that. I'll be able to. Once I've got that under my belt and I can understand the way he's writing the ranges, then I'm sure it's a fantastic book because it's the next step. Like I feel like I'm playing much more in line with GTO pre-flop. We've still probably got a long way to go post-flop, but we're getting better. We're studying with that DTO and just drilling different spots and understanding what you should be doing. But yeah, it feels like the next step is then, right, I've got GTO. I want to start learning how to exploit and deviating from GTO. I mean, I'll do it anyway, but I think knowing it on a high level is clearly going to be beneficial, very profitable. What about you? Are you reading anything in a minute?
Yeah, so I've just read the first Andrew Brokus book.
Play Optimal Poker. Yeah.
Play Optimal Poker. I was going to say it's POP. What is the POP? Play Optimal Poker. I've started on Play Optimal Poker 2. I've now read the 3 core books. So I've read Acevedo's textbook, sort of read it. I've read the Okani first book, GTO Strategy Simplified. And now I've read Brokus's book. And what I really love is how all 3 of them are talking the exact same game. And it really is the exact same. They've got the syllabus from the government and said, what we got to teach these kids? And they're all doing it in their own special way that really applies to different people. But they're so different. Their approaches are fantastically different. And they've all 3 of them have seen the market, seen what it needs and said, okay, here's something else that I think people need. One thing I will say about Okani that I found helpful is probably what hopefully will come, and I haven't read the book that you're reading because it is literally fresh off the press, is that the way he structures each part, every time he goes through a hand, or he goes through a different scenario, or goes through a different concept, it goes through the same parts again and again and again and again.
Yeah,
So
it drills it, doesn't it?
Yeah, and it's that kind of, I think that's deliberate, so that even if you forget everything that he said about the numbers and about what cards are here and what cards there, you're still thinking, well, that's there to balance your range. That's there because it's got blockers. That's there because that's the strongest part of your range. That's there because that doesn't need protection, so you put it in your checking range. You know what I mean? And it's constantly, it's that again, again.
Yeah.
Acevedo did do a little bit of that, but it's just so in depth, and it's so graph after graph after graph after formula after graph that it becomes difficult. And I did notice sometimes with the Acevedo book that he goes on for 2 paragraphs saying about, this has got blockers, so it's doing this, doing that, but he's talking like 2% of the game tree at that point, because you've decided, he's talking about if you've called a check raise with a marginal hands that's indifferent, and it's like, are you telling me I don't actually need to remember that, because that's 2% and I need to remember the 98%?
Yeah, tell me the 98% bit first, and I'll just remember that, because that's the most important thing. So, are you saying that Brocus is your favourite?
It's a mix. So what I found with Brocus is it took more energy to read, not as much as Acevedo. But then my approach to that was, don't try to take it in, just read through it and then go back and pick out the important bits when you're reading something else. And that actually is quite helpful for me. So I'll read something in, an online article or a GTO Wizard blog, and then I'll refer to the charts in the Acevedo book, which is really helpful. I do love that Brocus has dealt with exploitation and put things into words that no one else has, which is hugely helpful. But at the same time, the way Okani drills things I found really, really useful as well, and the language he uses and that kind of familiarity of building ranges. Remember we did that episode on what every part of the range should be doing? That is a direct theft of partly first Okani book.
He owns what part of the range he should be doing, doesn't he? He owns the concept.
We've got the copyright here. We haven't given.
But imagine if like different poker concepts were copyrighted and professional players had to pay like rights usage every time they used a concept in the game. It's like,
I'm copyrighting Dunk.
It's copyright Dunk. I'm just going to copyright single race pot.
Single race pot.
Get loads of money for that. It happens all the time. All right. Anyway, should we jump into a hand?
That'd be great.
So I've got one. If I can, maybe I'll talk you through it and see what you think. You can give me your thoughts as we go through.
That'd be brilliant.
Okay, so this is a hand from it's from a $33 tournament, which is way above what I usually play. But I just fancied it. I felt like I was on form this day. It was last week, I believe, weekend before last. And yeah, I just felt like I was really on form, and I just thought I'm going to go for it. So I played in this tournament. I think it was about 100 runners. At this stage in the tournament, this hand we're going to talk about, I was going pretty deep, not super deep. I think we was less than half the field left though, so we were getting there. I was under the gun, and there was actually only 5 players at this table, and it was obviously probably due to condense down, or they just moved some off or something. But this particular hand, there was just 5 players at the table. It was playing pretty, it wasn't too tight, it wasn't too loose. Everyone seemed to be of a pretty good level, which was weirdly relaxing, actually. I remember, we can talk about that as we go through the hand, but it was quite nice that people were playing what we might consider a bit more GTO, a little bit what we've studied. So I'm under the gun. The blinds are 500 and 1,000. We're sitting on a stack of 34,000. So the pot, before anyone puts any money in, is 2,125. So that's roughly a 14 M value for me, which is a bit lower than some of the others at the table. The guy in the big blind has just under mine at 31,000, but then we've got a 53, a 43 and a 54. So anyway, I'm under the gun. and I'm sitting down there, looking down to Queen of Clubs, 8 of Clubs. So, what are your first thoughts here? Is this GTO? Is this a raise? Is this an open? Sorry.
Yes, it's probably. I'm going to say it's just above bottom of your range. So I know that is probably in range for six-handed plus. But where you are, ICM does play a little bit more, but you're sitting pretty with 34, essentially 35 big blinds. So you've got playability. You're not under so much pressure. You think you're going to lose all your chips each hand you're in.
I think you're right. Range wise, I completely agree. I think the bottom of the range here is the lowest suited card would be a 7. You might play 6-7 suited as well, maybe even 5-6, depending on the table. But yeah, Queen 7 would have qualified. Jack 7, 10-7, 9-7, they would have all qualified. So yeah, Queen 8 is nicely there, nearer the bottom of the range.
Yeah, and just because of the ICM factor, I would bump it a little bit. I'd say this is more comfortably the bottom of your range than it normally would. So earlier on in the tournament with no ICM or less ICM, this is you just play normal. But where you do need to put a bit more of a premium. Yeah, there is a bit more risk premium with getting involved out of position with sticky hands. So yeah, but it's I'm splitting hairs. I would raise in this position. It would be 2 big blinds. That's about it. 2.1, cool. 2.2.
I just want to correct, actually. I think I said it was 14M. It's probably more like 16M, isn't it? 16.5, something like that. But anyway, that's kind of a little bit neither here nor there. It's still well within an opening range for that sort of stack size. So we do indeed open for the minimum. So we put in 2,000. Just a note on that, I think when you're as you get in that bit deeper, 2,000 I think is fine from under the gun, which is actually just the hijack when there's only 5 people at the table. From the cutoff, I might have made that 2,200, and then from the button, I might have made it 25. Just because I'm trying to get that into my game at the moment, where the later position you're in, the bigger you make the bet size, and that does a couple of things. One is when you're opening with a wider range, you do want a little bit more folds. So the bigger bet on the button would possibly get more folds. But then earlier position with the lower open size, that works well because you've got more chance of being free bet with more people left to act behind you. And that can just help control the pot size a little bit, especially when you're opening your kind of full GTO range. Queen 8 suited. It's obviously dominated if you've got 3 bet a lot of the time. So it just stops that getting huge.
Sure. But it also does open up. It makes the price a little bit better for limps. So it is a bit harder to play certain hands, but you're most likely to see limps from the blinds, and the blinds
you mean just like flat calls, you mean? Not limp, like limps are just when it's
sorry, yeah. So yeah, flat calls. But I meant actually a caller and limps behind the caller. But
okay.
Sorry, my bad. But yeah, so like multi-way pots is what I meant. With multiple callers, just because with it only being a min, the second someone calls, everyone behind is getting a price to call that a lot wider, especially out of the blinds.
Yeah, but you're totally right, and it's really annoying, and it happens a lot, I think, at lower stakes as well, because you just see you're trying to go heads up, and you're trying to play the correct opening sizes, and then suddenly you get like 5 people in the pot, and it's just not what you wanted with Queen 8 suited, really. But like I say, Tain, this particular table was playing a lot more GTO. It was generally, someone opens, most people fold. You wasn't getting a lot of that lower stakes limping, cally limping type of play. It was more, you get a defend or a free bet after you. It's generally that was what was happening.
Cool. Just a quick one on the bet sizing. Have you set buttons up in PokerStars so that they're already defined?
Yeah, no, only. I think it's like 2.5 times the big blind, but I actually manually put it in quite a lot now because I I really adjust, and I'm probably adjusting more than I need to, but it's one of the things I feel like I can do quite easily and quickly, like just work out what the position I'm in and how much I should raise by, like compared to the stack sizes and how deep we are in the tournament and the type of table. So I'm quite happy to adjust it. I find that fun as well. I think people start looking at you a bit like, oh, he's raising like what might be considered the correct amounts, even though they're probably not that correct. The fact that I'm changing them all the time from different positions, people are probably but do you mean buttons that actually do account for different positions?
No, yeah, just the you got the 4 preset buttons. That's all I meant. Just so that.
Oh yeah, I've got them. I think I've got them to like 2.5, and then like on the flop, I think I've got, or post flop, so I think I've got them set to like 33%, 50%, 68%, and like I think it's those, something like that.
Yeah, I've set mine to 2.1 and 2.6, and the only reason I've set them to that is because I really like it when it goes to a weird blind level and it makes my bets some weird size, because it makes it look like I'm just hitting the keyboard. So if it's 3,700 as the big blind for some weird reason, they're trying to fit extra blind levels in to keep the game going on longer. So when I bet 2.1, it's some 4-digit number kind of thing. And it means if there's any hope that it makes me look a bit more novice, because people think I'm just hitting the keys to raise it, whatever, then they're going to try to exploit that, and that's going to be a leak.
And you can bust them. Yeah. All right. Gotcha.
It's just me being stupid. Is the actual
no. But I mean, there's a lot of that goes on in poker, isn't there? Just trying to disguise, what you're doing and who you are and how you're playing and whatever.
Well, the other thing is that most people have already got it set to big blinds, so I'll raise it 2.1 and it just says on their screen 2.1.
Yeah.
Didn't achieve anything.
Cool. All right then. So just to recap, 5-handed. We're under the gun. We've got queen of clubs, 8 of clubs. We've opened to the minimum. We put 2,000 in. Everyone folds except the big blind, who defends and just calls the 2,000. So we see a flop which comes queen of hearts, ace of diamonds, 9 of clubs. So rainbow, queen, ace, 9. We have middle pair and an 8 kicker. We've got the backdoor flush as well. And that's about it. So the big blind obviously is first to act post flop. He checks and the action is on us. There's 5,000 in the pot. We have, the effective stack is 30,000. So we've got an SPR of 6. What are your thoughts here?
So the big blind's only calls. They've got every opportunity to free bet. So the top of the nuts, aces, queens, probably even 9s, I'm eliminating from their range.
Yeah.
There's no draws out there other than the straight, which for all intent and purposes is a gut shot. The chances of them having a strong ace, again, is marginal. So aces are now not actually making up a large part of their range. So they're more likely to have weak aces that are going to feel like weak aces against the early open. So they would be checking their aces. Pretty much all of them, unless they're getting crafty with like an ace king in their checking range, ace king of clubs or something.
No, I think they would check. I think they would check most hands, wouldn't they? Whether they've hit or not, they're going to check us, the pre-flop aggressor.
Yeah, so I think they're checking with range in this position because they've only called the big blind. They've only called your bet, and because you're the earliest position raise, I think they're checking with range. But I'm working out how often they've got hands that you're going to be scared to bet into for value, even though you've only got middle pair.
Yeah, there's not a lot. I mean, there's not a lot that's ahead of us at the moment, is there really? The fact that it wasn't free bet, it doesn't feel. I mean, they might have some raggy aces. They might have some raggy aces.
So they've got a lot more queen 9 in their range. You've only got the suited. They've got probably all the offsuits.
Yeah.
They've got a lot more queens in their range, but they haven't got a pair of queens, pocket queens in their range.
And have they got queen king Queen Jack, probably Queen Jack's just the call. Queen Jack suited, they might 3-bet. Don't know
Yeah,
if they should, but they might. So
I mean,
yeah, I get what you're saying.
they're the kind of hands that I'd give a 30% to. So I'm not putting the whole of it in their range, and I'm not going to give it too much thought unless the board really plays hard to that. But they've got a lot of queens, and most of them are worse than what you've got, because Queen 9's 2-pair, Queen 10, Queen Jack are getting into the potential 3-betting hands. They might not, they might check them, so they are beating you, but there's not too many. Anything above that, they've got a lot more lower than Queen 8 that they would be in this position with. So can you value bet is where I'm very slowly moving into. So are they calling you with all of their King 10s, King 9s, things that are kind of got a little bit of extra equity, so they can call with a bit more than just a gut shot.
Okay.
Does that make sense? Jack 9, Jack 10.
I mean, is there an argument for just taking it down now as well, and a third pot bet? Probably Queen X would come along, 9X would come along, and certainly Ace X would come along. So it feels like more hands that we beat would just call a third pot size bet, and that would mean it would be like a profitable play at this stage.
Yeah, so I definitely reckon there's a lot of value that you can get. The one thing with this specific hand, it does have a back door, which is helpful. One thing I'd ask is, how scared are we of a check raise? Because a well-balanced big blind, this is quite a sexy flop for a check raise if they've got a beefy part of it.
Yeah, like if they had something like 10 Jack for the open-ended.
Yeah, or a pair of
even, yeah, maybe even the gut shots with a backdoor flush draw, they might sort of think about check raising. But I don't think it's a good hand for the big blind to check raise, because the ace queen is so much more favouring our under the gun open range. So
yeah,
unless they've got the big hand.
Well, the thing is, on this board they could have decent pair with draw. So Queen 10, Queen Jack. It's more that even though we feel that this could be like the bottom of our value range at this point, are we so at risk of betting and opening ourselves up to a check raise that we lose all of that value too often? How often do they need to be check raising for us to not want to be betting in this position with the bottom of our range? So what's that? If you're raising a third of the pot, how often do you want to see a check raise? How often do you not want to see a check raise for that to be unprofitable? So a third, it's not very often. If they're only check raising, what, 1/5 of the time?
Yeah, something like that.
Or is
maybe
it
even a bit less.
In the assumption that you're not calling a check raise.
Yeah. And you know what? I think I agree. Like, looking at this, it feels like we've got a hand we want to continue with. Do we just check this? Do we just check it and leave all his bluffs in? Maybe let him bluff at the turn and we call it. It pot controls a little bit as well. If he has got a raggy ace, he's not going to want to get the pot massive anyway. Do we just want to kind of get to a showdown? But then there is an argument for, it would be nice just to get this pot here and now. If he has got some draws that might improve later, that we then deny equity to. It feels like a mix between just checking and trying to get to the river cheap, but letting him draw out a little bit, or raising it up and just denying some equity for some of the draws.
Yeah, I'm leaning with the raise, mainly because as soon as you check on this kind of board, which is extremely favourable to your range.
Yeah, it feels like if we're just playing range, if we ignore the fact I've got Queen 8 of clubs, we've got middle pair, just playing your range, this is a C bet, isn't it? To be frank, yeah. It's queen. You've got ace, a rainbow, ace, Queen 9. This massively favours our range, really. We've got the nuts advantage, and let's it seems like we should be c betting this most of the time, if not all of the time.
Okay, I agree. Let's move on. I think that's good.
All right, so I do bet 1,800 into the 5,100 pot, which is a little bit more than a third. We get a call from the villain, and we go to a turn which is the 3 of clubs. So we now have a board of queen, ace, and then 9, 3. 2 clubs on the board. We're sitting with 2 clubs in the hole with queen, 8 of clubs. So do we like this card? Is this a good card for our range, or is this better for the villain?
My immediate thought is that it's good in that it actually works with our hand, as well as it's a brick for most other intent and purposes, where we're blocking the villain having similar flush draws, although they can exist. But most of the flush draws that are beating us, I'd imagine they'd be pre-betting, pre-flop.
So maybe not though. I mean, they might have, say they had like king 4 of clubs.
Yeah, I was thinking more of the ace. So the king, I think, operates just the same as yours, but they're out of position because they don't have the ace. They can never bet with impunity. They always know that the ace could be out there. Mm-hmm. So they're just as worried as we are of that. But all the ace suited hands, I'd imagine being in their free betting range, unless they're playing extremely balanced and they've got this middle part maybe that they're checking. I've given that a lot less credence. I feel that their call in that position, and then their bet and check means that the ace isn't there. And if they've only got a king, they should be just as worried about flush over flush as you are. But they've got poor position for that. So I think this is a good card.
I think it's good. I think it's good as well, Tain. It's a 3. It doesn't. I mean, there are 3s in the villain's range and probably none in ours. In fact, there's definitely no 3s in our range except possibly pocket 3s. I think that's just under range.
I think ace 3 suited is in our range, but pocket.
Oh
pocket
yeah,
3.
Of course, yeah, and maybe actually think about maybe even king 3 suited, possibly. That's either in or just slightly out. But okay, well look, the villain checks this turn. It's starting to feel like he hasn't got much of this. There's now 2 clubs on the board. If he did have an ace and he's seen us check behind on the flop, would he not start thinking, hands rubbed together time, I'm slightly ahead on this marginal hand with my ace rag. If he had that, would he want to be giving our type of hand, 2 clubs, a free draw card? Possibly not. So it feels like he's not got much of it. He's checked again, so it's starting to feel like he's not got much of this.
It's really tricky because basically the villain's next action, I feel, is the one that really genuinely tells the story. I completely agree with what you said about this additional check. Is quite telling. But they did call an ace queen 9 rainbow flop.
Yeah. So what are you calling with on that flop? Has he got a 9? Has he got a queen? Has he got a raggy ace?
Jack 10. I like Jack 10. It fits in with the 9 a little bit, so you get to, if a 7 comes, something like that, you've got a little bit more to continue with. You might have it might be Jack 10 of diamonds or hearts, you know what I mean? So there's just a little bit of extras that are going
backdoor flush, open-ended straight. Yeah, he's definitely, he could well have some sort of draw, and he could well have a bit of the board, and he's just continuing with it. We made it cheap enough for him to continue. If you've got a pair, on a 5-handed table, and the under the gun, which is actually just the hijack, opens, you're in the big blind. You're continuing with a lot, I would say, on flop that you do actually connect with. If he had 9-8, for instance, even if it wasn't drawing to any sort of backdoor flush, or I would say you should continue. You should peel one off. You should see what comes.
Yeah. The thing is, against weaker opponents, I would play very differently. I'd be looking to set this up, which might involve checking to see what their action is on the river, knowing that if they check again, they're 100% weak. Whereas no weak villain is strong enough to check a good their very best hand in that position. Like they just will have to come out betting, and then you kind of know where you are. And most weak players don't see that as a really good opportunity to bluff. But that I wouldn't do that here. I feel you can get just as much information from a bet. Now you're actually getting for value because you've got equity as well to protect, where you can get check raised. You will then know the strength of their hand, but you can call it knowing that you've still got middle pair, second pair. You've still got the flush draw that can come. You're not dead to the check raise. You can just about call it if your bet is small and their check raise is of standard size, 2.5, 3 times what you've raised. So I would continue going for value in this position.
Would you? I can agree. I don't hate that at all. I think it's marginal. I think villain would play ace rag like he's playing it as well, and we could be just behind, but I also feel like we could be just ahead of some of the connections to the board, and certainly ahead of the draws. So yeah, I don't mind that at all. I do quite like a bet here, but in game I do opt to check, which looking back, I don't hate that either. I don't mind it. It's a little bit of pot control. You've got to remember we've got 8,700 in the pot. Effective stack is 28,000. He's coming along. It feels marginal. It doesn't feel like a definite let's load this pot up and get all the chips in. It feels like we could put a bit more in and he could call, and then we could put even more in on the river, which might end up being most of our stack. He's calling and he turns over like ace 5 or something, or even like queen jack, or it's marginal. And when it's that marginal, sometimes it is better to get to a showdown, just pot control. So I don't hate either. I
do think that's a bit. No, I think that's monsters under the bed. I genuinely do, just because your range as the under the gun opener is so full of this flop. You're expected to value bet, and even though the out of position player can like take advantage of that by slow playing, the second you check behind with a flush out there tells them that you're weak. I think that caps your range incredibly. I don't feel that because you can be betting in this position queen 8 of clubs for value. You could also be betting a set of aces for value, and there's so many value hands that you need much better bluffs than the queen 8s, which means your checking range, which is your condensed middle bit, is much more likely to be the 9-10 suited. And I think that the second, just because the big blinds range is completely different, it's so wide. They've been given an opportunity to fold, but they've still got a lot of trash that's got a vague connection to the board that they're behind on. But you're giving them free equity that they don't deserve when you've got such a range advantage.
Okay.
Yeah,
I hear.
You'll have so many bluffs that they're incentivized to call with their weaker hands because you've also got a lot of value. So you're betting so often that they're just exploitable if they end up folding, even or if they're slow playing. Like that's my feeling anyway. I feel that this is a good spot to bet, and that even if you get called and they have got a monster, you might hit a club and all of a sudden their monster's rubbish. They need to be protecting against that. They should be denying you equity. But that's where I'm at.
I hear you, man. I hear you. Okay, so the river then comes a 2 of diamonds. So just to recap, The final board now is Queen, Ace, 9, 3, 2. There are no possible flushes out there. There are no possible straights out there. We have second pair with an 8 kicker. The villain now bets 3.5k into the 8,700 pot. And if I may, this is, I'm happy with this. This, to me, there's loads of bluffs. There's loads of he might see this as thin value with some of his queens. He might even, no, I don't think he'd bet that. I don't think he'd see betting with nines as thin value. But yeah, I think this is thin value, but it's also a lot of bluffs. So again, the value part of that, I think, is marginal with what I've got, and it's a bit of a no problem. I'm definitely calling it. And the fact that there are now bluffs that he might be doing this with just make for an even easier flat call here. I don't think I want to go even bigger. I think I just want to flat call this and hopefully take down the pot. What do you think?
Yeah, I think the decision is how often does he expect you to bet behind, to check behind? I do feel that they can now sense that your range is capped. I do feel that they're underestimating. Well, no. I was going to say, I do feel they're underestimating the strength of your checking range, given what you said last time. The fact, if you're willing to check this hand, you're checking some pretty decent hands. So their betting range in this position might be because they've still got a lot of bluffs that just can't win at throwdown, that they're hoping will get more marginal hands than your Queen 8 to fold.
Yeah.
So I don't feel this has made you indifferent. I feel you've got plenty of value hands that are calling this. So I then feel if this was a bet that made you indifferent, they could only be doing it with the strongest part and the strongest bluffs. So that would just be most of their aces and maybe Queen Jack. I feel this is a call. I can't see him ever getting to the right number to make just less than half bet, half pot. They've not gone for value to sustain any kind of strength hands. Now, I feel the thing that you're most worried about in this position is Queen 2, 9 2, Ace 2, Ace 3. Something like that is probably the worst I can imagine you come up against, or just a wild pair of twos, pair of threes. So there are hands you lose into, but that's always the case. I just feel that they've got too many bluffs.
Yeah, too many bluffs. Yeah, Ace 2 I can see. Ace 3, I think they would have probably bet the turn.
Yeah. You're never betting in this position, though. You're only getting called by better hands, surely. Yeah, if you raise this to
yeah, exactly,
another 10 grand on top.
Unless we think he's doing this with his Ace X, then do I need to try and just get him off of this?
Fold.
You want fold? Well, no, I mean, say he had like Ace 5, right? And I suddenly put him all in, right?
Well,
I've then got better hands to fold. I'm just putting it out there, and I think I might be putting it out there because maybe that's what happened. I honestly can't remember, but it's kind of coming back to me as something I might have either considered or actually done. So I'm just chucking it out there to see what you think.
No, I mean, where I feel that you've landed with, they've not shown any kind of, they've not needed to protect against the flush, but then the flush didn't come in. They've not tried to get value, and the cards are there the opportunity is there for them to get value from you. No, I don't think that's particularly good. And I don't think a shove is you're putting way too much at risk for.
Yeah, just to get the aces, the Ace X's to fold, and they might not even bloody fold.
Exactly.
So yeah, all right. Yeah, I like just a flat call here. And in the actual game, I do just flat call. So the pot ends up at a nice 15,000, and villain flips over King 10 offsuit. So he did. So he was drawing. He did have a gut shot on the flop, and he called the flop, and then just went for a bit of a bluff when he missed it on the river. Still, it feels like quite a small bet to make on the river to expect me to fold, but maybe I don't know, what could he think I've got as a hijack open? He knows any ace I'm holding I'd call with, any queen I'm holding I'm going to be calling with. I'm less likely to have a king.
I don't think they've worked through the hand enough properly. What were you folding? You've got such a tight range. Like your starting range, what hands don't connect? The hand that he's got is probably the worst part of it. Maybe like King 7, but
what do you mean? Sorry, I'm not sure.
As in, like your opening range from under the gun is King 10 is the worst it could be that hasn't beaten him. So your opening range would be King 10, Queen 10, Jack 10, maybe Jack 10. Sorry, so Jack 10 is worse. So that's the only hand he's targeting, because everything else is Jack 9, Queen 9, King 9, Ace 9, any of the aces, any of the raggy aces. King 7, I suppose, is in there as well, just as a little bit, but everything else has got a piece of that board, either by an ace, by queen, or a better king. So
it feels like just a bit of a desperate bluff at the end, doesn't it? And we picked it off with our I don't even know if you can call it a bluff catcher. We just kind of changed our range and played it in a condensed way, didn't we? It was like, we're now not polarized. We're not either super strong or bluffing. We've got a hand. We want to see a showdown, and that's exactly what we did.
Yeah, like I feel there is a part of your range that I feel that they might be targeting. I just feel that they could have achieved a lot more with a slightly bigger bet. If they go 2/3, 3/4 pot, you are maybe throwing away the hand you got, and that's a much bigger part of your range that they're having success with. Considering how many, I've just got too many bluffs. That's the thing.
I think it was a weak attempt, a weak bluff. I mean, even a bigger bet, I think I would have called it. Is he really letting me see a free river card if he's got an ace when I've checked the no, I didn't. I checked on the turn though, didn't I? That's one of the benefits about being in position as well. Obviously, we're seeing what he does first each time. I think if the positions have been switched, the turn would have been a lot easier for him to maybe bet and represent. I don't want you to draw out on me. I've got ace something or other. But anyway, it was a bit misplaced from him, but not terrible. I think he just if you're going to bluff on the end like that, I think you need to probably make it a bit bigger, maybe put a pot size bet in, something like that, maybe even go a little bit over. You need if you're trying to get my pair of queens off of this, you've got to go a fair bit bigger than that, I think.
Just running back through the hand from their position of, is this just one of their hands where they're really struggling to get any kind of action, or is it, for instance, against an under the gun opener, should they be calling with King 10 off? I feel they maybe should, but then if it's that if it's that lower part of their range that benefits from free betting, or it benefits from a check raise, knowing you've got a gut shot behind it, I think you'd be betting into too much of your range though. So I don't think check raise was ever on the card.
No, I actually don't. I don't hate the way the villain played this. I think I might have played it in a really similar way. Like you've hit a gut shot straight on the flop. You call a third pot size bet. You check on the turn. You get a check behind. You miss on the river. You know what? My opponent's checking on the turn. I'm going to take a stab at this. I've missed my. I probably can't win unless I stab at this. So he stabbed at it, maybe stabbed a little bit small, but I don't hate his play at all. I think it's one of those hands. I think we both played it correctly, the villain and the hero here, and the best hand won. Sometimes it's as simple as that.
I feel they grossly they put your opening range from under the gun far too wide. That might be because you could have been playing that way, so that actually could have been even better for them to be playing how they did. So yeah, I do agree they didn't play wrong, but their bet on the end, I think, assumed that you had too many bluffs that were going to fold, or too many bluffs, or too many hands that would fold to that kind of small bet. So the bet sizing was too. They were too scared to put the money in, and I feel that they should have. Cool.
All right. Well, any final thoughts before we wrap it up?
No, I really like it. I really like how we're approaching it.
Yeah, and it felt quite formulaic. It feels quite formulaic these days, doesn't it? I feel like we're more confidently talking through the hand and being a bit more sure of what we're saying, which is good. I mean, we might look back on this in another year's time and go, what the hell were we talking about? But
well,
right now it's feeling good. It's feeling confident. If you're listening in and you've got any thoughts on the hand, how we analysed it or anything at all, please do post a comment and subscribe, right? Subscribe.
Like, Q&A.
Like, subscribe. All right. Well, thanks for listening, everyone. And thanks a lot, Tain. Always a pleasure. I'll see you next time.
Take it easy. Thanks, everyone.